Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Dynasty Diehards. And folks, we have a great show lined up for you. We are going to talk about some recent free agency news, some things going on around the league. We had the Elijah Moore trade to the Browns today. We'll dig into that a little bit. And then we're going to mock the first round of the NFL draft. Mock Draft 2.0 from the Dynasty Diehards. I've got my boy Jon with me today. Jon, how are we doing?
I'm here, man. Better than being in the Airbnb from Mesa, Arizona, like I was last week. So happy to be home and back in my command center and get a little rested and start ramping up. Just about a month to the draft, man. It starts getting real.
Yeah, man. And once we get the draft, we're going to have so much more to talk about because we're going to have actual landing spots, not just where we're dreaming about these guys going in our mocks. Before we get started on everything, guys, I want to remind you, make sure you are subscribed to the Razzball channel so you don't miss an episode. Make sure you like this video. Make sure you're following Jon on Twitter at Jon Helmkamp. You can find me on Twitter at Nate Paulvote. And, of course, follow Razzball on Twitter at Razzball. Tons of fantasy advice out there, whether you're fantasy football, fantasy baseball, fantasy basketball. We've got gambling. We've got all of it there over at Razzball. So make sure you check that out, guys. We've got a couple friends here in the chat. We've got Brad Bolt from Down Under. Brad, thank you so much for tuning in, my friend. And my dude Brad from Canada, from up north, Toronto, Dave. Thanks for tuning in today. We much appreciate it. And without further ado, let's get into some news and notes, Jon. I'll tell you, one of the funnest parts of my job is getting to design some of these graphics and drops. It's so much fun to get to put your creative spin on it. And speaking of teams putting a creative spin on things, the Jets, man, they're making some moves today. So first, as we teased at the beginning of the show, Elijah Moore to the Browns. They traded Elijah Moore and the 74th overall pick in the draft. The Jets get the 42nd overall pick. What they're going to do with that pick, we don't know. That's a second rounder. That's not really our wheelhouse. We want to talk about the first round. However, the Jets, to replace him, apparently, they signed speedster Mecole Hardman from the Kansas City Chiefs. He gets a one-year deal worth up to $6.5 million if he hits all of his incentives. So with this Jets news, this is interesting. We didn't think Elijah Moore was going to stick around.
No.
You get a speedster Mecole Hardman. We know how fast he is. I mean, realistically, he was underused in Kansas City for what he was. How do you feel about this for either of these players? Like Elijah, let's start with Elijah Moore. Is he finally going to have an opportunity to be fantasy relevant?
Yeah, I think that he might. I'm not going crazy optimistic about him yet. You know, there's all kinds of takes on Twitter about people that are jumping for joy and they're overwhelmed by the trade, and free Elijah Moore has finally happened and we're finally going to get to see him break out. I'm not necessarily going that far, but I am happy because clearly he and the Jets were just button heads. It just didn't work for whatever reason. It just was not the right landing spot there. They were on the outs. They were ready to move on. So both sides of that deal get what they want. Elijah Moore wanted a fresh start. The Jets get a second round pick. Maybe that becomes part of the trade package that ends up going to Green Bay for Aaron Rodgers. Maybe it's more ammunition for them in the draft. Don't know. So I think it's good for both sides. I'm happy for Elijah Moore. He's going to get to work with Amari Cooper, who's an incredible route runner, has been since his time at Alabama. So I think that he gets a really good veteran to learn from with Amari Cooper, and he gets the potential to maybe carve out a role, especially in the slot there in Cleveland. So I'm not saying Elijah Moore to the moon, but it's better than him being stuck in bench purgatory or, target abyss or whatever it is you want to call it in the Jets offense. So, I'm happy for him. I'm happy that he's going to get a fresh start. I hope he does well with it.
So this is going to be an interesting receiving core in Cleveland.
Yep.
What this signals to me is that this is a team that's going to try and get Deshaun Watson throwing the ball more. They're getting him good receivers. Now they've got Amari Cooper, as you mentioned, Elijah Moore, and Donovan Peoples-Jones, who has been very talented on the outside as well. So now you kind of you've got your X and your Y, and then you've got your slot guy in Elijah Moore.
And David Njoku.
And David Njoku at tight end. So
got some talent there.
And we know Deshaun Watson likes tight ends. So I think these are all guys that – stop it, Jon. These are all guys who are probably going to be fantasy relevant in some capacity. But here's my question to you. Donovan Peoples-Jones, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. wide receiver 4?
I think that he's more. I think he's more of the 3. I think that Elijah Moore has a better opportunity to see more targets than Donovan Peoples-Jones. I think that this is an offense that is going to start really trying to work the mid to underneath and really set Deshaun Watson up for a lot of very high percentage completion opportunities, while Donovan Peoples-Jones is going to be working on the outside, and he's going to, I think, be a bit of a boom bust option in this offense. I think that every once in a while, he's going to rattle in a 45-yard touchdown, and he's going to save your fantasy day. But there's going to be some other weeks, I think, where he catches 2 of 5 targets for 24 yards. And so that's it.
So we had Richard Sickles in the chat. What do you think this does to DPJ? And I think you just laid it out pretty clearly there. It's going to be more of the same of what we had from him last season, where he's on the cusp of busting out. You think he has a couple of good games, then he kind of goes back to irrelevancy for a few weeks. What about Elijah Moore in all of this? So do you think, what's his ceiling, I suppose, would be the best way to ask in this offense? Do you think it's a wide receiver 2? Do you think he can sneak into that wide receiver 1 category?
I don't think he can be a wide receiver 1, not with Amari Cooper there and not what we've seen from Elijah Moore early in his career. I think his ceiling is a PPR wide receiver 2, which is plenty valuable. Those are great guys. I think that he could develop into being a target hog. I think you said it best when you said Cleveland wants to get Deshaun Watson throwing the ball in this offense. And my personal feelings for Deshaun Watson aside, I think that they do. I think they want to get away from the ground and pound offense. You don't give a giant guaranteed contract to a talented quarterback for him to hand it off to the backfield 32 times a game. You just don't do that.
No.
So I think this offense is going to look different. I think they're going to try to spread it out more. And I think them bringing in Elijah Moore is a really great signal to the fact that they do want to have 3 wide receivers on the field at all times. So I think that we're going to see a lot of at least 3 wide receiver sets, with Deshaun Watson upping his attempts significantly from last year.
And that would make the most sense to me. Now, on the other side of this, we've got Hardman inking that deal with the Jets. Where does this put him for you? Do you think he's going to see an uptick in usage from what he saw in Kansas City, or is he still going to be kind of like that bit role player who, they're using on like third downs, or maybe they're running some sort of like jet sweep with him because he's so fast? Or is this maybe even more for the return game? I mean, can you see?
I was thinking this
returner?
Is almost more of a special teams signing for them as well. I mean, $6.5 million, including all of his incentives, is a decent amount of money. But I think that he's going to be able to contribute to them in multiple facets, and the more you can do, the better. So I think that's what we're looking at for Hardman. I just don't see it. I know that Hardman has his own hive on Twitter and has since the kid was in college, but what have we seen other than the occasional, screen that he houses that has shown that he is really anything that's consistent? And consistency is key in fantasy football. He's going to have a big play here and there. That's going to happen. But when do you put him in your starting lineup for fantasy? I have no idea. So to me, I have a hard time seeing it. It depends on how this wide receiver core kind of shakes out over the next couple months, because we know they brought in Allen Lazard. We know they have Garrett Wilson. Corey Davis might be on the way out. So Hardman is maybe your 3 in the offense. We know that Rodgers, if Rodgers does ever finally end up in New York, we know he's going to target Allen Lazard, and we know that Garrett Wilson is too good not to target. So how much left is there to go around for Mecole Hardman? I don't really know. I think he's more of a specialty player that is going to be a really good special teamer for them.
So is he someone you're maybe willing to stash on your bench?
I was afraid that was going to happen. I got the low battery warning from my headphones before we started. I thought they were going to be able to get through it, but apparently not. Hey, at least it was consistent, and I heard you continue to talk. I don't know. I'm not going out and trading Mecole Hardman. And I think there's going to be someone, if you're in a redraft league this coming year, that's going to be way more hyped on him than I will be. I think his ADP is going to end up climbing, especially if Rodgers goes there. So I don't know. You never want to trade for someone on the tails of like positive news for them. So the hype, like, now is not the time to go trade for Mecole Hardman, because I don't think you're going to get him for anything less than a rookie second. And I don't want to spend a rookie second on Mecole.
No, absolutely not. The one place I will try and have him, I've got a couple of dynasty leagues where return numbers are included in the individual players. I actually won a championship on Nyheim Hines' 2-touchdown game.
Nice.
Touchdown. The person I beat was not very happy about it, but they lobbied to have that rule changed in the league, actually. that's really the only situation I can see where Mecole Hardman would be relevant for fantasy, quite honestly. So now we're going to move on to, we'll get through these last couple here pretty quickly so we can get into this mock draft. But there's been chatter about DeAndre Hopkins. It's almost a done deal that he's going to New England. Do you buy that? And do you care?
If he goes there, I care because DeAndre Hopkins is really good at football. I don't know how much I buy it. I mean, he's an aging wide receiver. It just doesn't seem like a Bill Belichick kind of move. Now, what I will say is they have Michael McCorkle-Jones still on his rookie contract. And if they want to give this kid every opportunity to succeed before they decide what they're going to do with him long-term, then I guess it makes sense, right? Let's give him weapons. Let's go all in. Let's give him a wide receiver and see what he does with it. And if he still can't produce, then like, all right, I guess we've seen everything that we need to see. We're not going to pick up his 5th-year option, which I think after this year, they have to make the choice, I think. Yep. So that's coming up quick. So they got to make a decision on Mac. So it makes sense in a way that they would try to go do that. But outside of that, it just seems like a weird thing for Bill Belichick to do, to bring in an old wide receiver.
See, and I agree with you. And one of the things that, looking at their roster right now, they've got Mike Gesicki, who they just signed. Then they've got Devontae Parker.
1,000 tight ends. They've got like 8 of them.
But yes, however, is he really a tight end? That's the thing. Is I don't think the Belichick is looking at Gesicki like a tight end, because the guy can't block.
No,
Henry on the other hand can block. The majority of his snaps come in the slot anyway. And like, I know people are really down on Gesicki, and I'm just going to go on just a quick little rant here. Last season was terrible for him. He had 52 targets. He had 112 the season before when he finished as a top 10 tight end. But dude, when you're in an offense with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, what do you think's going to happen? Right. And then to couple that, Tua was not on the field for the majority of the season with the concussions. So he's got Skylar Thompson and Teddy Bridgewater throwing him the ball. It's hard for a guy like that to be successful with those quarterbacks because, first of all, Skylar Thompson, he's a rookie. And then Teddy Bridgewater's what Teddy Bridgewater is. He's a mid-level backup in the NFL. I mean, he's
so is Mac Jones. So
that's a fair point. Now, I like Mac Jones, but that's fair. They've got Devontae Parker. They've got Juju Smith-Schuster, who they just brought in. They've got Kendrick Bourne, and they've got the rookie Tyquan Thornton that they really like. They took him in the first round last season. I don't see any reason for them to do a deal for Hopkins. I think they've got everything that they need for a Belichick offense, and things are going to change because we're not going to have Matt Patricia calling plays.
Yeah.
We're going to have an actual offensive coordinator. So that's good news, I think, for Gesicki and for all these guys. I don't see Hopkins. I don't see the Patriots being willing to pay what it's going to take to get DeAndre Hopkins.
I think those conversations are really going to stem based on the price to acquire him. Because if Arizona's really just leaning into like, hey, we need to rebuild, and they're willing to do like a salary dump, and they can go get DeAndre Hopkins for a mid-round pick.
Fair point.
Sure, maybe they're willing to do that. And if you have DeAndre Hopkins and the new Todd Monken offense, yeah, color me interested. I think that could be very interesting.
I really like that. I really, really like that. I want to shout out our Cat Dynasty audience out here, Mr. Scampers. Thanks for tuning in, my friend. Now, Miles Sanders, the news broke right as we got done with the show last week, and I wish we could have talked about it a little bit, but we got Slime Sanders and now Adam Thielen to Carolina. And here's what I want to bring up, because this is an interesting quote from Adam Thielen after he signed with Carolina. He says, I think we have a real chance to win. I have a real chance to win a Super Bowl here.
Now, he left the Minnesota Vikings, who have been like one of the preseason darlings for the last 3 years of NFL analysts everywhere. They have a good roster and good talent. And you go to Carolina, and now you say you have a chance to win a Super Bowl. All right. Like, I appreciate if he's trying to like pander to his new fan base and, you know, make some money on jersey sales, but that ain't happen. What I find really interesting is that I just have no idea what Carolina's doing. You had inexpensive, good production at the running back position last year in Deonta Foreman, who you let walk to my Chicago Bears. I'm stoked about Foreman, by the way. That's going to be fun.
Yeah.
Him and Juice Herbert is going to be really fun in Chicago. You had good, inexpensive production at the running back position after trading away Christian McCaffrey. You traded DJ Moore. Like Chicago's just becoming Carolina North, apparently. We traded DJ Moore. You give up a bunch of assets to go get presumably a rookie quarterback, and they don't even know which one yet. I don't even know what's going on there. But then you go out and you sign a whole bunch of aging veterans to really fat contracts. So I don't really know what they're doing. It seems like a real hodgepodge, like, hey, maybe we can still make this work in a easy NFC South. But I don't really know what's going on there. So Miles Sanders, I mean, I like it for him. I think that he's going to see a lot of work, especially if you have a rookie quarterback that they're trying to insulate and bring along slowly. And then they also have Andy Dalton is going to be their quarterback. I mean, the entire offense is new compared to what it was last year. You're going to have new players all over the field. So there's no chemistry. It's going to be a bit of a hodgepodge coming along, but I think Sanders is going to get a lot of work. Top 10 running back? Maybe. I could see him being on the fringe of that. He's shown the ability to get into the end zone. With running back, it comes down to volume. I don't think that Sanders is the most talented running back in the world. I think that he's pretty good. I think he's like an above average running back, I think is how I would classify him. But they paid him. He's going to be their starter. He's locked in for a multiple year contract. So I think he's going to get a bunch of work.
Well, and I think it's worth noting that the head coach, Frank Reich, had Jonathan Taylor. And we saw a ton of volume out of Jonathan Taylor under Frank Reich.
Was in Philly. Frank Reich was in Philly with Miles Sanders.
Frank Reich was in Philly with Miles Sanders as well. And Miles Sanders had some pretty decent seasons with Frank Reich.
I can't believe I didn't put that together. There's been so many free agency moves that like drawing the lines between everything is really difficult to do. And then it's like, oh my God, Frank Reich's the new head coach.
It's head spinning. I'm not wearing Carolina colors on purpose, by the way. It just happened out this way. What do you think of Thielen? I mean, like, do you have any interest in pursuing him to roster him in this offense? I have a hard time wanting to roster a 33-year-old wide receiver who's been on the decline for a couple of years, and his quarterback is either going to be Andy Dalton or, I mean, who do they take first overall? Probably C.J. Stroud, though I have a feeling it might be Anthony Richardson. I think we've talked about this previously.
Yeah.
But is there really any value to Thielen at this point?
He's going to be so touchdown dependent, in my opinion. Yep. Like if he's able to have a 700-yard season but get 12 touchdowns, then okay, he put together a good fantasy year. But banking on touchdowns is so difficult to do. And if this offense is sputtering and really struggling to move the ball down the field because who knows what their quarterback play is going to look like, then relying on Adam Thielen to me is pretty risky. I'm definitely not buying. I think you're going to have a hard time selling. So I think in Dynasty, he's a hold, and you see kind of what the Carolina offense looks like through the first month of the season.
I love it. All right, John. I think we've got one more thing you wanted to talk about.
Yeah,
because it's impressive. Jaxon Smith-Njigba's pro day.
Yeah, I threw it on there real quick because it happened today, and it's important, I think, to discuss. Everyone's been labeling Jaxon Smith-Njigba as being a slow wide receiver, and the offseason's been funny because everyone loved him last year. And then there was this like pause on him. And then now everyone's remembering that he's actually good at football. So it's kind of been this little ebb and flow with him. He's not a burner of a wide receiver by any means. But today at his pro day, based on different stopwatches from different scouts, his 40 time was coming in between like a 4.49 and a 4.53, somewhere in that ballpark. That is plenty good for him. I was thinking like, hey, if he just runs under a 4.6, I'm happy because it's not his game. He's so good in short area. So I just wanted to touch on it real quick that running around a 4.5 40 for a wide receiver of his skill set and what he does as being a great route runner is fantastic. And I'm thrilled about him. And to me, he's my wide receiver one pretty handily in this draft class.
I'm with you, man. I did a mock earlier on a Dynasty show. He was the first wide receiver off the board in the mock. Speed, just sometimes, man, people get so hooked on that 40 time that they will ignore other things about a wide receiver. If you're a Dynasty manager, you should be excited about Jaxon Smith-Njigba. And now even more excited with that 40 time because we know he's got speed, and that's going to make teams want to draft him earlier. With that kind of draft capital, he's a wide receiver one in an offense wherever he lands, which, speaking of which, I think we should figure out where he's going to land, my friend. Let's get into it. All right, folks, we are going to mock the entire first round.
Yeah, we are.
All right. So on the clock, John, we've got the Carolina Panthers. They need a quarterback, a running back, a wide receiver, a tight end, and an edge rusher. We know what they're doing here. We know they're going quarterback. But here's my question. Which quarterback? Is it Bryce Young? Is it CJ Stroud? Do they like Will Levis a little bit more than anybody really knows? Or are they looking at Anthony Richardson like he's Cam Newton 2.0, which I know this is different coaching staff. It's different GM. They had nothing to do with Cam Newton.
Right.
But you can't help but look at the guy's skill set and think he could be Cam Newton.
It's really tough. For the sake of chaos, I really want to make Anthony Richardson this pick. And here's why. And we discussed it last week, especially when we had Dave Kluge on the show. They went out and they gave a 2-year contract to Andy Dalton to be a bridge quarterback. And they gave him decent money in doing that. To me, I think they might have tipped their hand a little bit in saying that we're okay bringing along a developmental quarterback that we think has a really, really high ceiling. And I think there's legitimate reason to believe that it might be Anthony Richardson. I don't think, like, if I had to put money on it, I'm thinking it's CJ Stroud. Like, that's what I think is more likely to happen. But I also think there's a really good possibility, a better chance than a lot of people want there to be, that they look at Anthony Richardson's size and his athletic testing that just blew the roof off the combine, and some of the throws that he can make from off platforms. His feet don't have to be set under him. His arm talent is there. And I think they look at this guy and say he might have the highest ceiling in the entire draft class. And we've seen in recent years NFL teams chase ceiling at the quarterback position and give a lot of assets to acquire that. We saw San Francisco give a haul to trade up for Trey Lance. Whether or not you think that worked out is a different conversation, but they made the same move to come up and get Trey Lance, and they left Justin Fields on the board because they thought Trey Lance might have a higher ceiling. So to me, I kind of want to make this Anthony Richardson for the sake of our mock.
So I'm 100% with you on everything you said. And like I said, we've had this conversation before, but I really do think they tipped their hand getting Andy Dalton, because his 2-year, $11 million deal. You don't give a bridge quarterback 2 years. You give him a year. If it doesn't pan out, you move on. If it's a short bridge, Anthony Richardson might need a season and a half to get there. So I like this. We're going to go ahead and bank it, folks. Now we have Anthony Richardson going first overall to the Carolina Panthers. Now on the clock is the Houston Texans. And I think everyone here is assuming Bryce Young is the guy.
I think so. It seems like they've been in love with him all along. I think if it's anyone except Bryce Young at 1, they just do high fives in the command center and run the card up to the podium.
All right. So we're going Bryce Young at number 2 for the Houston Texans, the talented quarterback out of Alabama. Now we've got the Cardinals on the clock, and we know this is a team that's going to be going defensive.
Yeah.
And our first mock, we had Jalen Carter, I believe, go first overall to the Bears. Now, that's probably not going to happen given recent events.
Right.
Do you think they go Will Anderson here?
Yeah, Will Anderson seems like he's more of a fit for their needs. I will also say that this is an interesting potential trade scenario because teams are going to be looking at the Colts at 4 as a quarterback needy team. And if they really like one of the 2 remaining, let's say you're shocked that CJ Stroud is still on the board at 3 and you're one of these NFL teams, you could absolutely see a phone call made to the Cardinals to move up to 3 to get CJ Stroud instead of letting them get to the Colts. So who might be interested in doing that? Maybe the Raiders, who they just acquired Jimmy Garoppolo, but Jimmy's a bridge guy too. Wouldn't it be funny if Jimmy ended up a bridge twice?
Look, I'm assuming he is at this point because, like, as good as he is, he's still not a franchise quarterback, John.
Right.
Like, and he has a hard time staying on the field. The guy's a little fragile, and that's not what you're looking for in your long-term quarterback. And sure, Josh McDaniels is familiar with him, but
so I don't know. This is an interesting trade situation. You know that the Colts are going to go quarterback at 4, and Arizona needs a lot of help on their team. So maybe we pull a trade here with the Raiders. Well,
between 3 and 7, where the Raiders pick is, if they just swap picks, they'll still get their guy. They can still get Will Anderson.
Oh, and even if it's not Will Anderson, you might have like Tyree Wilson or another edge rusher that you're really happy taking. Right. So I think this would make a lot of sense as a trade partner.
Okay, so we're just going to do a straight up pick swap, 7 for 3. No, they vetoed the trade, so there you go.
Well, obviously.
We're forcing it. So now we've got the Raiders on the clock at 3 with CJ Stroud on the clock. The CJ Stroud still on the board.
Yeah.
Okay.
CJ Stroud here if we got that trade.
We're going Stroud. All right, now we're on to number 4. We've got the Colts. So really what's left for them is Will Levis. Are you convinced that they take Will Levis here?
I am. I don't think that they leave this number 4 pick without a quarterback. And I think at this point they're going, there are 4 quarterbacks. We have the 4th pick. We are going to sit here and we're taking whichever of those 4 quarterbacks is still available.
All right, so now we've got the Seahawks on the board at 5. Really, they're looking for offensive line help and defensive line help. Is this where we see Jalen Carter come off the board?
So let's preface this by saying that we think Jalen Carter has answered all the questions. The legal situation is behind him. His pro day was really, really rough. It was very rough. He did not look like he was in shape. He was sluggish. He didn't finish his pro day drills because he was cramping up and winded. That's not great. But let's say that was leftover ramifications from a really rough month of dealing with his legal situation. He answered that. He put in a no contest on that. The legal situation is done. Excuse me. If teams feel like he's answered all the questions about that and he's in shape and maybe they bring him in for a pre-draft visit and he's dropped 5 pounds and he's, doing everything that he needs to be doing, then yes, this to me screams a Pete Carroll, John Schneider draft pick because the upside is immense as just a clog in the middle of that defensive line. So I'm going to say it's Jalen Carter to Seattle.
And I agree with you. And it seems like he really has answered most of those questions. I'm not worried about that part of it. I'm more worried about the pro day, but like what you said, he's been dealing with stuff for a month. Yeah, of course. He's probably a little sluggish, a little tired. It's hard to be motivated to go work out and stay in shape in those situations. I know it. You know it. Everyone in the world knows it. But I still think this is where Jalen Carter goes. And especially if there's a great place for him to go with good culture, it's Seattle. Pete Carroll gets the most out of his guys. He has been doing it his whole career. I mean, apparently he made Russell Wilson look a hell of a lot better than he was.
Hey, you know what? Pete Carroll had Michael Bennett up there, who was a very interesting personality defensive lineman, pass rusher, who kind of played to the beat of his own drum. Mm-hmm. I think that he would be fine being a player's coach for Jalen Carter.
100%. Now, we're on to pick 6. We've got Jalen Carter at 5 to the Seahawks. We've got the Detroit Lions, who I'm going to say it now are going to be a hell of a lot better than a lot of people think at number 6. They're going to be a hell of a lot better. I think their biggest needs come on defense as well. Now, This is where I could see Christian Gonzalez coming off the board because he's really skyrocketed.
Gonzo's my dude, man.
I know that Devin Witherspoon is ranked ahead of him by most people, but I think Christian Gonzalez is the better cornerback. And I think a team like Detroit is looking at his style of play and says, this fits with what we're doing. This fits with our culture. This fits with the team. And this is a lockdown corner. This is a Sauce Gardner type, Patrick Surtain type, who their rookie season, he's going to be locking. He's going to be lining up against another team's number 1 wide receiver out of the gate.
So here's one thing. They addressed their DBs like crazy in free agency. I could still see them going DB. I could. But if you're telling me that Will Anderson is on the board here, and last year they went Aiden Hutchinson, and you're just putting a couple of young pin your ears back and go defenders up on that front in a Dan Campbell defense that wants to bite kneecaps, dude, I don't think they leave this spot without Will Anderson if he's sitting there for them. Like, I don't. I love if they go corner, it wouldn't surprise me at all. But I think that Will Anderson has fallen here, and I don't think they let him get to 7. Because if he gets to 7, not Carolina, the Cardinals walk out of this draft with the guy that they would have taken at 3 anyways. Right. If he lasts to the next pick. So I think to me it's Will Anderson.
So remember what we talked about before the show, where there's been so much going on in free agency that you kind of forget some of these signings happened.
Yeah.
That's me with Detroit. I completely forgot about Gardner Johnson. I'm with you. I think it's going to be Will Anderson here if he's still around on this pick. So we're going Will Anderson to the Detroit Lions at number 6. Now, Cardinals are back on the clock. Pick 7. Their guy's gone. But what do we think we do? Do you think they go cornerback here?
They might, because it's a big need for them as well. I think it's they look at their board and defensive players in particular and say, who's the best player available, like independent of position, because they have so many holes. And I think it's Christian Gonzalez. To me, I just think he has a world of upside. His athletic testing was unreal. He's a lockdown corner with long arms and can jump, and he's got speed. Like, this is a dog. And if you need a corner that can go against DK Metcalf, like, that's a dude that can potentially hold up against DK Metcalf. So I think it's Christian Gonzalez.
All right, we're going to bank that one. Christian Gonzalez to the Arizona Cardinals. Now we're on to pick number 8. We've got the Atlanta Falcons. Their big needs: quarterback, wide receiver, and they need an edge rusher and a linebacker and a better head coach, but they can't get that in the draft. I think I could see them, because it's the Atlanta Falcons and because I think this franchise is run by a bunch of morons. I could see them.
Johnston?
No. Even worse. I could see them reaching on Hendon Hooker here because they need a quarterback.
God, that would be horrible.
It would be horrible.
I don't think Hooker sniffs the maybe first 3 rounds, to be honest.
I've been seeing him mocked into the first round the last week or so.
That's crazy. Stranger things have happened, I guess. I don't see it, but whatever. I'm going to say that we don't do that here.
We're not going to. We're not going to. I was just throwing out they're idiots scenario. That was all I was doing here.
They are idiots.
I think this is another
pass rush in a big way. I think badly. That's a very big need for them. And I think that the best pass rush on the board is Tyree Wilson.
No, I'm going to have to agree with you, John. As much as I want to see chaos and Hendon Hooker go here.
Yeah. By the way, can we talk real quick that Kalijah Cansey is popping up in the top 15 names now? Like, dude has impressed so much in this pre-draft process. Like, man, good for him. He's athletic as hell, and he's done a great job.
Well, he balled out at the combine. We were watching an interview with him this morning on Good Morning Football, and that was something Jen had mentioned. Like, yeah, this dude's going to be a really good player in the NFL. However, do you think he goes to the Bears here at 9? They need the defensive help. They could really use someone like him on the line.
Here's my stance on the Bears. My stance on the Bears is that if one of Will Anderson or Jalen Carter is available to them there, well, let me put it this way. If Will Anderson is there, I think they take him. If Jalen Carter is there, I think you have a conversation about whether or not you think he's checked the boxes from a personality standpoint, because Ryan Poles is so big on, do you love football? Like, do you love to play the game of football? So if he checks those boxes in his interviews and says, hey, listen, I've had a really rough month. It's been crap to deal with. I didn't handle my pro day well, but I'm committed. I'm a pro. I'm in. Like, if he answers those boxes, I think he's there. If it's not one of those two players, to me, the next thing that you have to do is set Justin Fields up for success. And if you're setting him up for success, I can make an argument for Jaxon Smith-Njigba. I can make an argument that you've got to address offensive tackle because they need a right tackle in the worst way. Even after free agency, even though they addressed guard, and they're probably going to address center on day 2, they need to leave the first round with an offensive tackle. So I can make an argument for Jaxon Smith-Njigba, and like my excited, offensive-minded fantasy heart would love that. But I think the smart thing to do here is Paris Johnson. That's my guy in this offense is Paris Johnson over Peter Johnson.
Well, and like you're saying, if you want to set Jalen Hurts up for success, Jalen Hurts, good Lord, Justin Fields.
It's the same blueprint.
Sure.
Same thing.
But if you want to set him up for success, you've got to shore up this line. They had problems all season, and you can see it in the way Justin Fields played. So, yeah, I'm good with this. We're going to go with Paris Johnson. We're now moving on to the 10th pick. The Philadelphia Eagles select. Is it Bijan?
God.
I think it's interesting, too, if you look at the needs here. It says they need a wide receiver. They don't need a wide receiver. It's ridiculous. So we're going to move on from that. They're definitely not doing that. This is the real question, man. You had that tweet from Bijan Robinson from his Philly visit. He seemed to love it there. And you know that if they want him at 10, they can get him at 10. So if everything went well with his visit with the team and the facilities.
And listen, it's going to. Bijan Robinson is the most bulletproof prospect, interviewer, personality. Like, dude is a stud through and through. God. Okay. Let's see. They got back James Bradbury.
They got back Darius Slay.
They got back Darius Slay, which was huge. They got back Jason Kelsey, we know. Fletcher Cox, we know.
Yep.
So their secondary is locked up. So I don't think it's going to be Witherspoon here. You know, I kind of want it to be Bijan. And I think it's an embarrassment of riches sort of pick. But the dude is a top 5 talent in this draft class. He's a top 5 talent. It's just how you value the position. And to me, your running back position is a glaring weakness because you just lost Miles Sanders.
Right.
And I think that they let Miles Sanders go knowing that they've got a great chance at taking Bijan Robinson as 10. They used one of their 30 pre-draft visits on flying Bijan into Philly. Man, I'm going to do it. I'm going to say Bijan, and I think we did it the first time too. And it makes so much sense to me that they would go this route. I have a hard time seeing another need on the board like that matches up with the value to take because they also have their own pick at 30. So you've got plenty of ammunition for them to take an embarrassment of riches pick at 10.
Right. They could also wait and get Jahmyr Gibbs at 30. That's a possibility, but Bijan Robinson is the best back in this class. It's not even close. It's going to be Bijan. So that's what we're going to do. We're drafting Bijan for the Philadelphia Eagles. You're welcome. Fly, Eagles, fly.
With that offensive line and with that zone scheme and with those wide receivers, Bijan Robinson is the Dynasty RB1 the second he's drafted.
100%. 100%. This is Breece Hall plus.
Oh.
Plus.
It's Hall on steroids. It's just insane. I mean, I can wax poetically forever, so I'm not going to. Okay, so John, now we're on to pick 11. We've got the Tennessee Titans on the clock. They have a lot of needs, but right now I feel like their biggest need is wide receiver. And I have a feeling they might take Quentin Johnson here and kind of look at him like he's that AJ Brown type guy. Big enough, and they can replace it. They can basically replace AJ Brown with Quentin Johnson. Now, if you go Quentin Johnson with last year's rookie wide receiver.
Treylon.
Thank you. Treylon Burks. My brain. There's too many names. Quentin Johnson and Treylon Burks, that is a tall, athletic, powerful wide receiver duo. You know, it's basically you're replicating the Ole Miss wide receiver room of A.J. Brown and DK Metcalf. So I could see them coveting that style of wide receiver, even though they don't know who their long-term quarterback is going to be. I think at this point, you're not exactly drafting for your current quarterback fit. You're just taking who you think has the traits that you want at the wide receiver position. I could see that being a Quentin Johnson type for sure. So I would say it's either him or Peter Skoronski. And they look at taking Skoronski at tackle.
I feel like it's going to be Quentin Johnson. I think this is a franchise that kind of wants to see Malik Willis maybe step into some sort of regular starting role by the end of the season. And what better way to do that than to have Treylon Burks and Quentin Johnson to throw the ball to, especially if they're going to get rid of Derrick Henry. If they're going to move Derrick Henry, they're going to have some big bodies for whoever's at quarterback to throw to. So I think I'm going to bank it, man. I think we're going Quentin Johnson here to Tennessee at 11. Now we have got the Texans back on the clock at number 12 because they have an embarrassingly large amount of picks. Where do you think they go here? Because they have a million needs again. I mean, they just brought in Dalton Schultz. Woohoo. Got rid of Brandon Cooks. Woohoo. I don't really know where I think they're going to go here.
I think you give Bryce Young a target-friendly, separating wide receiver, and I think it's Jaxon Smith-Njigba.
I'm sold on that. So we're just going to go ahead.
You can do much better than to give your rookie stud quarterback a rookie stud wide receiver and watch those two grow up together.
Yeah, I love that. Now we're on to 13. We're on to the Jets, and I'm going to tell you exactly who they're going to take.
Okay.
It's Peter Skoronski.
Yeah.
They need a tackle.
Yep.
He's right there. We had Brad Bolt in the chat. He wanted Skoronski gone a lot earlier. Brad, he's going to the Jets. That's what's going to happen. He's going to be protecting Aaron Rodgers more than likely. Hopefully it's not Zach Wilson if they just bomb this whole thing. That would be horrible. All right, now pick 14. We've got the New England Patriots on the clock here.
Pick me.
John,
If Devin Witherspoon is on the board for Bill Belichick, there's no way in hell he doesn't take him.
I agree.
It's just as simple as that to me. Like the traits, the ability, okay, cool. Here's your future lockdown outside corner, which he has done so many times over the course of his coaching / managerial career. Belichick, this is your next dude. And you put him out there on the outside and you're good out there for the next, 7 to 10 years.
Oh, 100%. Given what they have at quarterback, like as long as they have a good defense, I think they'll be okay. But we saw that was their strength last season, was just a lockdown defense. And this will only make it more so. So now we're on to pick 15. We've got the Green Bay Packers on the clock. I'm going to get interesting with this one because I think they might snag Dalton Kincaid at this pick.
Yeah, I could see that. If it's going to be Jordan Love at quarterback, as it's presumptively going to be, you have young wide receivers that you've already invested draft capital in the last couple of years. And they lost
Tunyon,
Big Bob Tunyon to Chicago, inter division rival there. So replacing the tight end position with an uber athletic Dalton Kincaid, who has just like the sickest hands at the tight end position. Like he's so friendly to a quarterback. You just put it anywhere in his general vicinity. And every time you watch Dalton Kincaid, he's just an acrobat in the air and contorting his body and getting a hand or both hands on the ball. So I think Dalton Kincaid is a friendly target for Jordan Love to continue to develop at quarterback. I like it a lot.
And that's what they need. They need those big friendly targets. And with Bob Tunyon gone, it sounds like Mercedes Lewis is going to be gone as well. He might end up in New York, which
Mercedes Lewis is like 48 years old also. So
I'm well aware.
We need some youth.
So now we're on to, with pick 16, we've got the Washington Commanders on the clock. This is a team that has a lot of needs too, John, but I think the most pressing need right now for them is they need more of a pass rush. And we saw that weakness last season where this defense was supposed to be so good, but they couldn't get pressure on a quarterback and it cost them games. I mean, is this where we see Lucas Van Ness come off the board?
That's the name I was going to throw out there, and I'm glad that you said him instead of Kalijah Kancey because I like Kalijah Kancey, but Lucas Van Ness is an edge, and you need that outside pass rush there. So I'm going Lucas Van Ness.
All right, we're going to bank that one. We're on to pick 17, the Pittsburgh Steelers.
It's Joey Porter Jr. and it always has been because it's like it just fits. There's something about that fit. All offseason I've been going Joey Porter Jr. to Pittsburgh, and every single time we do one of these mocks, he's just sitting there for them, every single time.
Like father, like son, right?
Yeah, dude. And how
get
cool
Joey Porter in there?
How cool?
Yeah, this would be amazing. And their secondary, I mean, outside of Minkah Fitzpatrick, isn't great.
Right.
It's been, and you get a shutdown corner like Joey Porter Jr., stays in the state. He's a Penn State alum. His dad played for the team. This just makes all the sense in the world to me. So we're going to do it. Joey Porter Jr. to the Pittsburgh Steelers at 17.
That one's on the preseason script that they send to the NFL.
Yeah, definitely.
Junior to
you got that too?
Yeah. It's actually I left it upstairs, but I'll bring it next week.
It's so nice of them to send that over to us. It really helps with content, right?
Really.
Okay, so now we're on to 18. We've got the Detroit Lions on the clock again, and we had talked about them needing a defensive lineman, an interior lineman. I think that's Kalijah Kancey.
God, if they double down Will Anderson and Kalijah Kancey,
I don't see why not. I see no reason for them to not.
I don't see why not either. I think it makes the most sense here on the board, and that is just so much athleticism. And I think that is a good fit. I think the athleticism is something that I could see Dan Campbell coveting. So,
well, I think it's either Kancey or Nolan Smith out of Georgia, maybe, because they do need some edge rush help. But I'm really leaning Kancey here because I think if you can shore up that run attack, the run defense, and get some quality pass rushers on the interior of that line, that's best case scenario for them coming out of the first round, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, that would be a haul. And as a Bears fan, I'm very scared of what Detroit is building.
Yeah.
I'm telling you right now.
And I should be.
The Bears and the Lions, I think, are going to be like the new rivalry of the NFC North because we have Justin Fields, and then you see the youth that the Lions are building, and whether Goff remains their long-term quarterback option or they end up, moving on from him after a bad year, whatever. I think Minnesota looks like they're kind of phasing, and Green Bay, we have no idea what life after Rodgers is going to look like. So it's a fun division right now. And I hate liking what Detroit is doing, but I do. I really, really like what Detroit is doing. So I'm going
All right. We're going with it. Now we've got Tampa Bay on the clock at 19. Now this is where I've seen Hendon Hooker mocked, is to Tampa Bay. Now I don't necessarily think that's actually going to happen. Obviously they do need a quarterback, but they signed Baker Mayfield, right? So Baker, you're not Baker, man. Baker's happy to be there. It was funny. They asked him on Good Morning Football the other day why he decided to go to Tampa Bay, and Jen immediately out of her mouth, because they asked. Right? And for anybody who doesn't know, my wife is also an analyst. So
and she's fantastic.
She's smarter than me. Let's be honest here.
Sometimes we should just bring her on and do like another one of these mocks and bring her on here. And just,
ask her if she wants to do that.
Yeah, I will do that. Yeah.
All right. Okay, so Tampa Bay, they've got some needs, but I think their biggest need right now, that offensive line just fell apart. Just absolutely fell apart. The problem is you've got Anton Harrison out of Oklahoma. Could be a good fit in that offense. Him and Broderick Jones, I think if they're going to go that route, that's where they're going to go.
Yeah.
However, I could also see them going after a defensive lineman. Miles Murphy, maybe. You've got Brian Brees out of Clemson.
Yeah, I think, you know what? I think they need help at offensive tackle in a big way. And so I think it's Broderick Jones. I think he is big and he is nasty and he is physical and he has a hell of an anchor step and he can play. Like Broderick Jones was showing out at the combine too and just like throwing people out the club like on every drill. Like he's just so crazy strong. I think Broderick Jones makes a lot of sense as they look at potentially leaning towards a rebuild in like 2024. If they're looking at one of those 2024 quarterbacks, making sure that your offensive line is set ahead of time is not a bad way to go about it. So I'm going to go Broderick Jones.
We're going to bank it, John. I definitely agree with you here. Now we've got Seattle back on the clock at 20. Oh boy, they've already addressed. They got Jalen Carter with the 5th pick. Now they just need offensive line help. So now is this where Anton Harrison goes? I know he's a tackle, but
I could see him kicking inside.
Yeah, it's easier to kick inside than it is to kick outside. For sure.
I could see that. I'm trying to think if there's anything else here. I will say that I think Brian Branch would be incredibly tempting, not necessarily from like a positional need standpoint for Seattle, but just as a really versatile safety, which is something that Schneider and Carroll covet a lot.
Oh, 100%.
So I could see that being tempting just because I don't think that they would think he'd be on the board here at 20.
I could see it. I
think that Branch should be tough for them. I think that they would look at Brian Branch as like, hey, this is a chess piece and we can figure out where to put him. So I think it would be between Brian Branch and, you know what, you can also never have too much pass rush. So if it was Miles Murphy out of Clemson, I could see that too. But they'd really be doubling down on defense here either way, it looks like.
You know what? Let's go with Branch because you sold me on that versatile safety. It's what was the bread and butter, the Legion of Boom. So we're going to go that route. Now, Miami forfeited the 20th pick. So now we're on to 21. And we've got I always want to say San Diego, but it is the Los Angeles Chargers. Now,
this is where it gets fun for me, man. As soon as the Chargers get on the clock, I'm like, all right, get your popcorn because wide receivers are going to go. Like somewhere between here and the end of that first round, you could see 3 to 5 wide receivers potentially get drafted here in the back half of the first. It gets really fun right around here.
Do you think they go wide receiver? I mean, Keenan Allen's getting up there in age. Mike Williams can't stay healthy.
I think it's Jordan Addison, man. Like I think that if Addison's available to them with what you just said, Keenan Allen's getting up there, Mike Williams can't stay healthy. You want to know, like, there's 2 wide receivers in this class that fit a little bit of a Keenan Allen mold, which is like slippery route runners, and that's Jaxon Smith-Njigba and Jordan Addison. So if Addison is sitting here for them, I think that would be a really electric pick. And even if Mike Williams and Keenan Allen do stay healthy, you go 3 wide a lot with those 3 guys out there on the field. And
Right.
Eckler is also asked to be traded. So you need more pass catching help if Eckler does go. And even if he doesn't, you still need help at the position. So I think Jordan Addison makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And everything you just said makes sense to me. And like I've been saying this for weeks, Jordan Addison plugs into an offense is immediately fantasy relevant. I don't care where he lands. He's just that kind of talent. He won the Biletnikoff Award. And I'd love to see him go to Pittsburgh. It's just not, I don't know how realistic that is, but I think this is realistic. I think he will go at 21. If he's not off the board already, he goes to Los Angeles. And then I'm going to have to deal with him as a Broncos fan for the next 5 to 7 years.
Yeah, congratulations. Good luck with that.
Yeah, right. All right. So now we've got number 22 on the clock. It is the Baltimore. Wow.
Baltimore
Ravens.
Baltimore.
Okay. This is where I think we see Zay Flowers come off the board. Personally, they need wide receiver help for Lamar Jackson. They've got a new offense with Todd Monken, like you referenced. Maybe they go out and get DeAndre Hopkins, but then what? You've got DeAndre Hopkins and you've got Rashad Bateman. You need another wide receiver. And Zay Flowers, I think, would flourish in this new look Baltimore offense. We're assuming new look Baltimore offense.
I'm going to tell you, there's also a really fun stay in the state story with Deontay Banks at cornerback as well. And Banks tested crazy well. And they need help at corner also. So I could see that, but we're assuming that Lamar Jackson stays in Baltimore. Right. This thing is just dragging on forever. There hasn't been a peep out of that situation in weeks. But assuming that he stays and they want to invest in him, I think it would be a really good faith draft pick for them to take a wide receiver.
I agree.
But Deontay Banks is also really, really good. So I love Zay Flowers.
Well, and here's the thing. They can likely get a pretty good wide receiver in the second round. If they want to go with Deontay Banks, keep him in Maryland. They need help at corner anyway. And when you've got a quality corner in the first round, when you can address things in the second, third, and fourth round, I think you kind of sold me here on Deontay Banks as much as I wanted it to be Zay Flowers.
The Bears have their second, Baltimore. So it's now, and then they don't pick until the third.
See, that might change it a little bit for me because I think that they have to show that good faith to Lamar Jackson if they want to keep him around.
I think it's Zay. I agree with you. I could see this being Deontay Banks, but I don't think Lamar Jackson would be happy if you enter camp, if they miss out on DeAndre Hopkins, if you enter camp with Rashad Bateman and a 3rd round wide receiver.
Yeah, 100%.
Not happy with that. So I think it's Zay Flowers.
Okay, so Zay Flowers goes 22nd overall to the Baltimore Ravens. Now we have got the 23rd pick coming up here, Minnesota Vikings.
This is Deontay Banks. If Banks is still there,
it has to be.
Banks. That one to me is like a slam dunk. I'm not even thinking about it.
Yeah, that was pretty easy. So now we're on to the Jacksonville Jaguars at pick number 25. Where do you think they go here? They need help on the line. They need help on defense. But specifically, they need a defensive back. But there isn't anyone really sexy on the board right now that you want to take in the first round.
You know who's been getting a lot of talk is Osiris Torrance. He's been getting a lot of talk over the last month or so as an offensive lineman that can potentially creep into the back half of the first round. He is a natural guard. He transferred to Florida and continued to flourish this year in the SEC. And I think that's a big position of need for them. So I think he's someone that is often being ranked just outside the first, but he's getting a lot of buzz right now. And I could see this being a pick where they go, yeah, that's a position in need. And we think that he can be a very consistent and solid guard to help Trevor Lawrence grow and take the next step. I could for sure see it being Osiris Torrance here.
We're going to do it, John. It's Osiris Torrance to the Jacksonville Jaguars, pick number 24. So now we're on to the 25th pick. This is the New York Giants. Now, I have a feeling they might go wide receiver here.
I do too. They went out and they acquired my God, dude, the names. I'm just drawing blanks today. Raiders tight end.
Darren Waller.
God, I don't know what my problem is today. They went out and they got Darren Waller, so they got a weapon for sure. You need more though for Daniel Jones, who they just invested a bunch of money in. Options available there. I mean, Josh Downs to me is a great wide receiver. And for being as small as he is, he's great at contested catches. That skill set kind of like translates like Devonta Smith coming out of college. Undersized, sure, but he won contested catches all the damn time. And I think Josh Downs is very similar to that. So I could see them going that route. They don't need tight end anymore. The needs there on PFF have not been like updated. So I think they have to really love a wide receiver to take him in the late first.
What's not to love about Josh Downs, though? For everything you just said, he's a great weapon for Daniel Jones.
There's nothing for me. Like I love Josh Downs. He produced at a really young age in college, like from an analytics standpoint, which I know isn't how people like to think of me, but analytically, he's got a great analytics profile as well.
Yeah.
Let's do it, man. I mean, he is a spread the field threat that can win contested catches and give Daniel Jones some big play ability.
Okay, so we're on to the 26th pick, John. It's the Dallas Cowboys. What dumbass move are they going to make?
You got me with that one. I have no idea because Jerry Jones, Jera, is such a wild card. I think if we're being smart about it, then it's Brian Brees.
Yeah, that's where I'm at too.
I think that that's the smart move, but expecting him to do something smart is very difficult. If we're being really stupid, maybe it's Jahmyr Gibbs. But
I could see that because Zeke going by the wayside. They brought in Ronald Jones, whatever, nobody cares. He might not even make the team.
Yeah.
But Jahmyr Gibbs, second best running back in this class, and he pairs well with Tony Pollard.
Yeah, him and Tony Pollard are like super similar, right? You get them in open field, and they are as slippery as can be. They're great pass catching threats. Now, because they're so similar, are they going to invest a first-round draft pick on the same type of running back, or are they going to wait and get a thumper? Because last year they had that thunder and lightning with Zeke and Pollard. So are they going to wait a little bit and take a bigger running back, or are they just going to go for playmaker as playmaker? And Dallas has always loved playmakers and go with Jahmyr Gibbs.
See, and that's kind of where I'm at because he's a playmaker. And then Jerry Jones loves playmakers, like you said.
Yeah.
And I could very easily see him going after Jahmyr Gibbs. Jahmyr Gibbs is such an electric back to add that dynamic to that backfield. And don't you think Mike McCarthy would love to have this guy in tandem with Tony Pollard?
I think that he would. And they did re-sign a lot of defensive help in free agency. It's the type of stupid pick that I can see Dallas making, so let's go with Gibbs.
A stupid pick that kind of makes a little bit of sense.
But it's just Jerry Jones has always loved playmakers. The original playmaker was Michael Irvin. And like he's always used that, and his whole philosophy is always stuck in the past, and you can never get enough playmakers. And I could see it being Jahmyr Gibbs just for the pure like electric upside that it brings.
Yeah.
And I think if that happens, I think that Buffalo would be pissed.
Oh, yeah, Buffalo's going to be pissed. It's going to happen. But I think Buffalo's probably going to go more for a cornerback. They need secondary help pretty badly. I could see it either being Cam Smith or Emmanuel Forbes going to this pick. I could also see them going offensive line. Maybe this is where we see them take an offensive lineman. But my gut tells me they're going to wait on offensive line. That at this point, they need a guard, they need a center. They're not going to take a traditional tackle. I don't think Sean McDermott has any interest in trying to move an offensive lineman into the interior, who's an exterior lineman. But cornerback, I mean, Forbes and Smith are two very talented cornerbacks that could easily sneak into the first round. Which one do you like better, though?
Oh, that's tough. To me, I would give the nod to Forbes. I thought that he held up incredibly well in the SEC. And I know that it's a little bit cheap to kind of give the nod based on that. But in terms of level of, competition, well, actually, Cam Smith is also from South Carolina. So they both faced. That's a really, really tough one, man. I'm trying to split hairs here in terms of what I like more. But I think Forbes is a little bit on the light side.
Fair enough.
The Cam Smith. Yeah, I think that I would probably lean Cam Smith. He's just got a little bit more bulk to him. He ran a 4.43 40, which is pretty damn good. He had a 38-inch vert, big broad at 11'2". So I think the athleticism is there for Cam Smith, and I think that he's about 15 pounds heavier than his counterpart there. So I think if you're really just splitting hairs, I think I would give it to the guy that's a little bit bigger and a little bit more athletic. But I think
in the division, that makes sense. You've got some bigger guys at wide receiver. You want a bigger corner to cover some of these guys. So we'll go Cam Smith here at 27. Now we've got the Cincinnati Bengals on the clock at 28. This is an interesting one. This is where Anton Harris finally comes off the board because they've got to protect Joe Burrow. They've got to protect Joe Burrow. And I know they got Orlando Brown on one side, but do you get an Anton Harris to drop on the other side? Or maybe they kind of address their defense a little bit? You've got Brian Breesy still on the board. You've got Nolan Smith and Miles Murphy still on the board. Do you think that's more of the route that they end up going?
Yeah, I think that Brian Breesy is really hard to pass on here. I think that he gives them a lot of versatility on the defensive line, and I think it's just something that they really desperately need to address. I don't think there's any kind of stud offensive tackle here other than DeJuan Jones, who is a big old masher. He's like 380 pounds.
Yeah,
he's insane. So I could see them going that route and keeping him in Ohio. But I think Brian Breesy fills a pretty big need for them on the defensive line. I think that's the way that I would lean.
I'm sold. You sold me, John. All right, so we're on to the 29th pick. We've got the New Orleans Saints on the clock. Their needs are almost all defensive in this draft at this point, and they're going to have their pick of some decent edge rushers. You've got Nolan Smith and Miles Murphy, as we just mentioned. Then you've also got Will McDonald out of Iowa State, which could be an interesting pick for them.
Yeah, Miles Murphy to me is just a name that keeps standing out, and I know that he's not necessarily the exact fit for what their defense needs, but they need help getting pressure. And I think that Miles Murphy is someone that can generate pressure. This last year he had 6 sacks, but he had 21 hurries, and he also had 2 batted balls. So he's someone that lines up on the outside a lot. Like, he's a true edge in terms of where he lined up in college. And I think that that's something that would translate pretty well to what the Saints need on their defensive line.
All right, let's bank it. Miles Murphy, 2 Clemson players off the board in a row. Now we're on to the Eagles' second pick at pick number 30. They could do really anything they want here.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's just embarrassment of riches. I don't really know. I think you just kind of look and go, what do we want? Who's got the highest upside?
Well, and you could be looking at a guy who's a future starter that's going to sit for a year. Maybe we know Jason Kelsey's going to retire. This is probably his last season. So maybe they go DeJuan Jones. Maybe they go Anton Harris here, or, maybe they get richer as an edge rusher. They get Nolan Smith, get richer on the defense. Really, whatever they do, they're just going to get richer at a position that they already have filled.
They really are. And to me, God, they just have so many ways that they can go here. It really is just a what's your flavor sort of pick.
Right.
Which is really interesting to be in that kind of position. For Philly, maybe it's Anton Harrison that they look to be a long-term kick into guard option.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I figure it's either going to be Harrison or DeJuan Jones. Harrison's the better offensive lineman per every grade that we've seen. So I think we bank that one, John.
Yep, let's do it.
All right. Now, final pick of the first round of the 2023 NFL Mock Draft 2.0 here on Dynasty Diehards, Kansas City Chiefs. Again, this is a team that can do just about anything. However, I will say I think their biggest need is wide receiver at this point.
It is too. I don't know. Listen, we said it all last offseason. Who the hell is Patrick Mahomes going to throw the ball to? And I tweeted that earlier today. And then all he did was go out and throw for over 5,000 yards and 40-plus touchdowns. But they lost Juju Smith-Schuster. They have, nothing. They lost Mecole Hardman. It's Sky Moore. That's it. So
yeah,
if you're looking at the wide receiver position, someone that has been talked about all offseason as slipping into the back of the first round is Jalen Hyatt. because of his big playability, his ability to stretch the field. He was in his wide open offense and catching deep balls from Hendon Hooker all year for Tennessee. And if you need a wide receiver that can go and do that for Pat Mahomes and spread out the offense, while Sky Moore probably works more as maybe a slot, then I think that Jalin Hyatt would potentially make a lot of sense. I know that he's a bit down there on the board, but that huge production that he had this year out of Tennessee and the ability that he has, in the first draft, what do? We put Tank Dell here because he was a theoretical speedster. And then his stock is really down from the combine because he did not run what a lot of people thought that he was going to run. He's still crazy shifty, but he's not. He's going to get first round draft cap. But Jalin Hyatt and his high end production, I think this is someone that would make a lot of sense to put with Pat Mahomes.
Yep. It's funny. When we got to this pick, my thought was, can I talk John into Jalin Hyatt here? I didn't even have to. So there we go, folks. Jalin Hyatt to the Chiefs at 31. You heard it here first. And there's that big, beautiful mock board. We'll be tweeting this out later. I'll make sure to get it out on the Diehards account. John, thanks so much for showing up with me today. It's always a blast doing mock drafts. I have to go pick up my kid from the YMCA because it's spring break. And you wouldn't know it's spring. It snowed this morning.
Yeah.
So
I'm in Michigan. It's pretty similar. Now, I will say that things are starting to bud, to creep. I can't wait, dude. Spring is around the corner.
Our tulips started coming up this week. So
so
yeah. It's funny how that works, right? Get a little bit of warmth and boom, here we are. Yep. Well, friends, thank you so much for tuning in. We appreciate it every week. We'll be back next week to do something. Probably a rookie mock draft, I think, is the route we're going to go next week. Talk some news. We appreciate you tuning in. Make sure you are subscribed to the Razzball channel. Make sure you're following John, whichever way I point. Make sure you're following John on Twitter. Make sure you're following the Diehards account on Twitter and Razzball. And folks, we will see you next week.
I stay loose, I stay hype. I stay loose, I stay hype. I stay loose, I stay hype. I could do this all night, cause I do what I like. Yeah, I do what I like. Yeah, I do what I like.